Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's in fine fiddle, so to speak. Um, to start off, we have uh, a, a question here that um, I might say is from Carl Corbet, and she asked me to repeat it, and I'd be delighted to do that. I just want to make sure that my top of my head's cut off, so we'll do it this way. Okay, good. Um, And before I start, I'd just like to say we're a little short of questions. Um, and I appreciate everybody sending in questions. So there's been just a little bit of drought in the last few weeks. So if you wouldn't mind, put your questioning hat on and see if you can come up with something. I really appreciate it. So Carl's question was, you have mentioned the word awe many times in past years in trying to calm the awe down. I understand that it is not just another word, that that it what impacts does awe have on us as a personality? Sorry, I didn't speak that.
Read that.
I'll reread it. She says, I understand that it's not just another word. So then she asks, what impact does awe have on us as a personality? And the best I can do with this is suggesting that while you're watching inside yourself, what you're trying to do is develop a place within the personality that you can go to so that while you're watching you and the events that occur inside of you, energetically, of course, and any other event for that matter, you have responses to those things. And if you could slow down the responses, because responses are really based on your personality's engagement with how you normally are brought up or have been brought up from the time of your birth. So, what you're doing there is you're checking those experiences, and there is a kind of reflexive response that occurs with them, and that is to be filled with awe about how valuable you are, or filled with awe about, in a not so positive way, about how they're not happening to you like other people. This is not about other people. This is not about you. This is about process in the growing of and the shifting of how our receptivity would be to higher state expression through us and in us as we're engaging with others or as we're engaging with ourselves. Even hearing that in terms of what I'm trying to say, it's not a perfect way to say it. So I would say right away. So the one thing that I would say is that any reaction that you have has an inclination to be considered as valuable by the personality or not valuable, because there's a judgment involved with that, which aligns with how any individual, you in particular, whoever you might be, me, anybody, and where that experience puts you, the personality, in a position of some kind of value. This holds you in a place that is focused on the personality rather than engaging with watching or considering, noting what is going on within you. Uh, and remember, all of our personalities want to squeeze back into acting the way we have been acting before because it's more comfortable to do that. And it's easier. So, one of the things that I said about that was try to calm yourself down. Well, what to do, how to do that. You may have better ideas with respect to how you calm you down than I do. I can only tell you what I try to do. And that is, I try to tell myself, easy, Ron, take it easy. It's okay. Just calm that down a little bit. Let go so that you can see what's going on. Then follow that energy where it's going. See what it's trying to do. It will be difficult to do because, first of all, these things link up in little steps because it's those higher states try to train the personality to understand beyond its self approval or self assessment. Well, that's a statement. It's really kind of difficult because when we look at our personalities, that's what we are. That's what we believe we are. And what you're trying to do is see that you're not only that. You have constructed that form for a purpose that relates to engaging with others in a manner that you believe or you think you need to relate to them. Therefore, they will know you, whoever you may be, relative to what you think you are or what you not even think you are, the identity that you approve of in your engagement with life, whatever that may be. And that is quite interesting because there are so many different personality states and so many personalities. So as we're growing, we're trying to slow things down a little bit so that we can see better inside of that personality that we've constructed and wonder about whether we would like to make some adjustments. And the reason why is because we're learning how to see internally how we are. And sometimes there are characteristics within all of us that we would prefer not to have. Now, that's a big step because, in fact, we're also trying to protect the personality that we believe we need to have. Somehow we are enamored by it. So, when awe occurs, it can take many shapes. You can be fearful that you see something and you hope no one else would see you like that. Prior to that, you didn't see anything. You just interacted, reacted, engaged, and believed that that's the only way to be. And you're either right or wrong, good or bad, or whatever that happens to be. These things are normal in human beings. And in growing, the exercise of allowing yourself to be watched by you to some degree is not a judgmental thing. It's a learning thing. You learn This is how you are sometimes, but you're not that all the time. You like to make an adjustment. Well, that adjustment will occur if you're careful and engage, and then it will reroute itself and go back into you because it's used to being there in a reflex reaction or a way of being that has been precious to you in some way. This is how we are. This is not good, bad, right, wrong. This is how we are. Then you learn that you have these things in you and that others do as well. Not exactly the same, different. But not because they're bad people. It's just because this is the angle of training that they've been involved with. And most of their involvement has been directly related to copying other people or seeking to be loved by whoever is training them. And usually that's parental background of some kind. And our nature, our internal nature, is learning how to function here on these planes by watching those we want caring from. And that usually, and I'm talking about parental or those who bring you up. And that's not a negative thing, it's a thing that occurs. And what you make out of that forms your personality structure. What you make out of that. You are perceiving how others think you should be. Therefore, you get to be something like that. Not a perfect image of what they want you to be. Not a perfect image of maybe what you want you to be. So this is a kind of a awe shape. You can have tremendous experiences and become flattered within yourself by you, not realizing or recognizing that you are in a process of learning, and process means bit by bit by bit by bit, you learn more about how you are. That inner training by a higher state is not trying to elevate you, it's trying to show you and help you understand beyond your reflex automatic. So that in itself is awe-inspiring. But it moves beyond that. You begin to realize that if you calm down, you can see more and understand more about the great fear each and every one has of not being thought of as valuable internally. And we go to great lengths often to prove that we're valuable in some way. That's an aspect of awe, not so constructive sometimes, but constructive from our point of view. Kind of necessary from time to time, based on where we are in our internal personality structure, as we are trying to make sense of the world and those of us who are in it. Not such an easy thing. Nobody gets it perfectly. It's just you're working through you. And you don't want to maintain a particular level of growing that informs you that no one else is growing. But that's the personality orientation. And there's a flavor of competition, as you know, in looking all over doing your so-called research, which is a nodding in and a nodding out of a personality's engagement, what they think they need to think, what they think they need to know, and what they accept and what they don't accept. It's how it's done from the view of a personality's engagement. You will read stuff and you will look at stuff that you'll agree with, and you'll look at stuff that you don't agree with. That's not research. That's assessment. That's judgment. Research might be, is there something that might be helpful to me where I am? And you look to find something like that, and then the personality interferes with that because it's not calm. It's in a learning mode. It's in love with itself and maintaining and growing with great effort. Something within itself that makes it look more helpful or more important or more valuable. It isn't easy to grow internally. It isn't easy to calm down under, if you have let's say, an exciting experience, but it is eventful. In that, if you do have such an experience, then you know something's going on, no matter how big it is. Something's going on that might be an indication that you're doing something, whatever it is, you're doing something that may help you to understand that you're in a process of development towards an inner realization of that spiritual flow. And I'm talking energetically here. I'm not talking verbalizations only. I'm talking about something energetic that's subtle. Our dilemma is our perception is fairly low. So therefore, we need to have something that touches harshly, strongly, our perception so that we'll notice something. The trick is learning to calm the intensity that we use naturally to get that energy that is in us, one could say, intensity in us, and direct it in directions that we approve of in the formula we call personality. And the linkings of that physical, emotional, and mental structures that we use to engage with folks and ourselves. So if we can calm that down a little bit, which is against what other people would recognize as valuable, because they want you to talk, engage, focus, help them to know that they're getting somewhere or knowing something. But if you can get to the point where you can acknowledge your inner growing as something that, if calm, you could perceive subtler energy, subtler engagement with those higher states. And those higher states will comply. Let's say those higher states will try to help you. It's a better thing to speak of, I guess, and help you in relationship to understanding deeper. But it is subtle. And subtle means softer, gentler, to bring us out of our natural, normal focus in our day, in any day, is quite something. And we seek to find things that are inclusive of how we are, but broader, so we can gain access to believing that we are more able somehow. Those higher states will help you to see that that may not be helpful by giving you more. The problem is what you will look at. You will see that as something positive and reach to increase the value of your personalization, because in our experience, historically, that has been done in our world so that we remember people, so-called. And those folks, and I'm talking about spiritual folks, those folks had a gentler engagement with those things, more respectful of others, and recognized that their focus, their particular focus, was on higher states, not on engorging their personality orientations. So this, I called it engorgement. It's probably not a very good word, but it's what we have to do to make ourselves feel valuable, or what we often do. Let me put it that way. But it's not as real as what we believe. When we start seeing something else, there's a sense of awe. How did we get to understand that? How did we get to know that? It came out of nowhere. And at first, we have to ignore it because basically we're used to dealing with us, knowing about us, which we don't know much about. But we believe we do. And that is how we consistently continue to engage in that way. And we fight like crazy to maintain that place within us that is valued by us somehow better than any other kind of understanding that could develop. So look out for the blaming aspect, which is another level of awe. It's a cultivated awe to self-protect. It's not devaluing, it's cultivated. All of us have cultivated personalities, or copied them if we didn't cultivate, or we've done both. And we continue to do so often without our understanding, and sometimes without our perception. This is how we do it. It's not bad. It's how we do it. Also, we make sense of things relating to reactions. And that's a bit of a misunderstanding, but it's it's kind of a way of sensing out the landscape around us, or the humanscape around us. And then we respond to it in our treasured ways, because they're the only ways that we practiced. So you have gained a personality through practice. And that's where you are right now, all of us. So the next move, being aware internally, looking for that internal flow by using some of the tools. Yes, they work. Had a strange one. Someone asked me in England to send some DVDs and CDs to a place in Texas. This particular individual tries everything out. And he said to me, "These things work." And I said, "Yeah, they do. If they work, why not use them? If you use them, you will find they don't always comply with the personality's orientation. So the personality will protect itself. You will forget to use them under some circumstances. You will remember to use them under others. Normal stuff. Perceive that energy the best you can. And while you're engaging, watch for it. Engaging with life, I mean. Watch for it. It isn't easy. You don't go from, I don't see it very often. I love that statement. That means you see it sometimes. So that's part of the process. That's how it works. You gain access to perceiving more and more the more you continue to engage with it. It's the nature of our nature relating to that flow of consciousness that operates through us, so we can engage with and express ourselves in the manner that we normally are, so we can see it better. It's like starting new life and learning to understand and feeling sometimes like a 3-year-old not quite getting it, or a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old, and moving in directions which are really wonderful. Then when you can perceive that energy in you, do both. Be aware of the energy and be aware of you. Live life and be happy. And try to be as kind as you can, not only to yourself, but to others. It would be really helpful. Remember this one adage: if everything you do, and this is really uncomfortable, engages with others on this planet who do similar things. Let you think about that for a second or two. You're linked up to other people, whether you know it or not. You don't have to believe it, you just are. It's not about belief. You change one small, tiny thing that you believe could be done slightly different. You affect a wave of difference out there to all those who are similar to you. No pressure. You don't want to repeat that to yourself too often. You'll get to understand that it might be very true. None of us do well with this one. We're normal human beings engaging with the world, attempting to understand and be involved with it relative to the construction that we've been involved with. Construction of that personality that you hold dear to you, that is similar to those who you have held dear to you and still do. So what you're doing is starting to live again, learning, being curious. You don't have to be judgmental about that. You can notice and then start thinking other people who are growing and who are not growing are the same as you, because there are aspects that you hold so dear to you that you would not let go. And there are aspects, as a reaction, and this is not flippant. There are aspects that you would find in you that you would prefer not to have. It's the same for all of us. Go slow. Understand in your way. And then wonder about your method of understanding. And continue. That's a key thing. Continuance. While everything inside of you is screaming, don't, because it's been trained that way. And it fears to be left out. The same as you fear, or anyone else fears, that you will be left out. Somehow, of whatever you believe you will be left out of. This is quite an interesting, it's a little deeper than I really wanted to go with this particular question. But this sense of value comes in a very strange way, for example, or a sense of awe comes in a very strange way when you start calming down internally under certain circumstances. And even if you're successful and you're trying to perceive the energy, for example, I'm talking to you, I'm trying to perceive the energy that's in me. No different than when you're listening to somebody or I'm listening to somebody. Try to do the same thing. And there is a strange gentleness that can come over you when you're paying attention to what's being said or how you're saying something. Suddenly you realize there are a couple of words that you might change, a way of speaking that you might not necessarily agree with, a way of intensifying to get your point across. And this is not so easy for us because we tend to use the same kind of reflex engagement that we're used to, even if we think we don't have it anymore. So it's learning to become a perceiver and a respecter of not only yourself, but others for where they are and for where you are and for what just happened one way or another. So these things are places within the self, within your way of thinking of you that can be noticed. And when you notice them, the links start to be, you start to notice deeper. You're not only noticing a person and how they are, you're noticing the energy that is there and used by them for the purpose of making them feel, their personalized version of them, feel comforted. But there's a deeper level of comfort. Knowing that that flow is there in you, that people talk about as the essence of an individual, the soul of an individual. You know now. You begin to experience it. You know that is real. Whatever someone tells you doesn't make you go against yourself. You have that knowledge and it doesn't leave you. And that's what you could call a spiritual context. That the personality is not destroyed. There's adaptation going on, evolving differently. And it's a slow process. I remember talking to a guru one time, and you can find this, it's written down, not extra special. He says, any experience you've ever had means nothing. It's just to help you understand that you're involved in a process, involved in a movement towards becoming more able. You're constructing a form, and it has nothing to do with what you already think you have. The personalization begins to disappear. But the engagement of that form doesn't necessarily disappear. But it becomes less determined to be front and center and more important than that universal flow. Right now, we're a species that believes it's more important than any kind of anything else that we can't perceive. And our levels of perception are very low. That's being honest. But here's another piece of honesty. Whether it's low or not, it's there. And we are learning. And others have learned before us. Not many. But if any have learned before us, then it's a road that we should travel. It's really worthwhile. Well, Carol, I hope that helps a little bit more than the last time we talked about this. And I'm sure you'll let me know. Here's a question from Marie Jose Perrier. I'm not sure that it's not involved with the same kind of thing to some degree. Why does it seem that in spiritual life there is different types of phases? One that's more religious, one that's more mystical, one more psychological. I would add one that's more materialistic, more scientific, because all of it, from my perspective, seems to be an aspect of spiritual life. And the only thing I can say about that without being melodramatic about it, is that these languages, language of religion, language of the occult, the mystical, occult meaning we are learning to figure stuff out with the help of higher states, very generalized one. Mystical meaning experiences that occur, and we are expressing those experiences. And also, there's an element of the personality still involved with them, as well as in the occult orientation, the psychological, where you engage with views, reference points uh, that relate to the psyche being healthy relative to the understanding we have currently on these planes, or unhealthy, either one. These are like following certain kinds of views that have been considered by many over long periods of time and will continue to be considered over longer periods of time. But these are languages that try to express a way of living, especially religious, mystical, cult, whatever, a way of living, not so, well, okay, a way of living that relates to the experiences of others or the beliefs of others, and you are aligned with those beliefs and consider the words used in that language to be of value to you where you happen to domicile or live. In some of the other mystical and occult languages, these are languages that help people to understand sets of circumstances that are directly related to experience in some form or another. And others have used these words, and therefore they seem reasonable to use because you align with the words that they're used to try and help yourself make sense of what occurs to you. With religions, philosophies, various points of view about all kinds of so-called spiritual questions, including is there a God, is there not a God? So many languages come up with absolute and complete views of truth, often not very experiential, often very traditionally focused on how things should be, could be, would be, and just often points of view of interpretations of how others have experienced high level contact with a universal flow of some kind. What's often missed, no offense to anybody, is that the idea of engaging with these higher states changes you somehow. With us, speaking for myself, imperfections are there, and you're engaging with them. You could say lifetime to lifetime, but let's just talk about this lifetime. In life, and how you function with others, or attempt to function with others, usually gives you an indication of some of our imperfections. Perhaps it would if you consider any kind of a way of acting that you, in particular, whoever you are, might use as imperfect. The straw on the camel's back on that one is that normally people, when they act in whatever which way they act, do not believe it's an imperfect way of acting. They believe it's the only way to act. And you got 8 billion people doing something similar. That should give you pause for thought. If you are a considerate person, a person is willing to wonder or be curious about the vulnerability of our whole species, including ourselves individually, then you would ask these questions. I wonder why there are so many different ways of being, and that we have the only right way to be. If you don't find humor in that, then maybe it's my dry sense of humor. It's a bit scary. And we are all vulnerable for many, many reasons to alignments that indicate the only way to do things. And it's hard for us to say that there are many ways to see the same thing. The old elephant joke. Blind people touching different parts of an elephant, coming up with different descriptions of what was there based on our own personalized sensing. As terrible as that one is, the reality, maybe I can't see 8 billion people standing around an elephant, but I can see 8 billion people getting in groups of people thinking that they have the only right answers. And that is the way it is. It's not experiential. With an inner sense that can perceive higher states. Otherwise, each one of them would be talking about the energy flowing in that elephant that allows it to be alive. One could say life force, yes. Say love force. You could say anything you wanted to. Because if you mean it, then for you, that's what it will appear to be. I think that's enough for tonight. Remember, thank you very much for the questions you have sent in. And if you will, be so kind, I would really be glad to accept any more questions that you might have. Some most difficult questions to answer sometimes, and most fascinating. Thanks. Let's meditate for a while. We will meditate for anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour. And Marlene will set up the music for us. And have a good evening. And now you can just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. And have a good evening. Take care of yourselves.